When I was a child and went to an audition, I met an old man. I say an old man, he was probably a little older than I am now, close to 70. And he said to me, "Now, Bruce, all of acting is in the voice."
And my large kingdom for a little grave, a little grave, an obscure grave. Or I'll be buried in the king's highway, some way of common trade, where subjects' feet may hourly trample on their sovereign's head. For on my heart they tread, whilst now I live, and buried once, why not upon my head? O Merle, thou weep'st, my tender-hearted cousin.
There was a long tradition in the theater for speech and oratory. And we need to divide these things up in English into three general areas. The first area is what we call pronunciation. And in speaking, that means the way you shape your lips and use your tongue to make specific vowel and consonant sounds. The vowel sounds are carried by air, and you vocalize those, as in ah. The consonant sounds are shaped by your tongue primarily, and they stop the air, as in ah. The third area is the idea of intonation, which is the rise and fall of the pitch of your voice in the context of a sentence in order to create meaning. So if we take that sentence I just spoke in the context of a sentence in order to create meaning. So if I raise my pitch, you'll hear different meanings. In the context of a sentence, in order to create meaning. In the context of a sentence, in order to create meaning. In the context of a sentence, in order to create meaning. So each of those different intonations carries with it a different kind of idea. It depends on what I'm speaking about, either context or sentence or meaning, and whether or not I'm trying to create a question or a statement. American goes from a fairly low pitch at the beginning and will rise up where it really matters and then come down towards the end of the sentence. So those three areas. Now, American speakers and children learned what we called oratory, the ability to make persuasive speeches or to speak and communicate in order to create a point. And this was really throughout the 19th and early 20th or mid-20th centuries. This was how politicians made their points, particularly in America. It was through the art of oratory or the art of speaking. And most university programs that became theater programs really started as speech and oratory programs. The idea of oratory and learning how to enunciate and articulate, and I'll get to those two terms in a minute, changed a little bit when people started putting more emphasis in the 20th century on the psychology of acting, rather than what the 19th century had, which was the ability to create a vocalized performance. Well, of course, that was all before the electronification of performance, which really began in the 1920s and came to life in the 1930s with sound movies and radio and things like that, which pretty much changed the theater. People stopped putting so much emphasis, particularly after Marlon Brando in the 1950s, putting so much emphasis on articulation. Let's talk about those two terms very quickly. Diction is the ability to use your mouth to differentiate various sounds so that people can understand the words you're speaking. Articulation is the use of consonants to break up the vowels. So if I want to say the word butter, in English is pronounced butter, in British it would be pronounced butter, the D or T in the middle of that word breaks up the sound, which begins with a B. So we go bu, D, and the is the schwa sound, the most common vowel in English, just a neutral So the is articulated with a B at the beginning, a D in the middle, and an at the end. Butter. So each consonant basically articulates the sound of a vowel. So when we practice speech in English, we have three parts of doing this. One, to shape the vowels, as in ah, to articulate the vowels, as in at, and to make the words full and together. What are you doing? What are you doing? So we have, diction, articulation, vowels, consonants, etc. Now, because these things are important, we have separately important, we have acting exercises that treat all of them. Acting exercises that deal with the psychology of the voice, acting exercises that deal with speaking and articulation, and acting exercises that deal somewhat with what we call the placement of the sound in your mouth. Now let's first just start with vowel or pronunciation exercises. And the vowels were first sort of defined for exercises by the teacher Arthur Lassac in his book, The Use and Training of the Human Voice. Now there are 6 positions that we generally associate with the vowels, and I will just go through them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Number 1 is ooh, very tight round lips, and we practice that from a neutral to a ooh, 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 ooh. Then the number 2 position, which is about the size of your finger, oh, oh. Now I'm making the diphthong, oh, the glide from o to oo, to make the o sound, because we rarely use and almost never use in American English this sound, o. It's a fairly neutral sound, but we do need to shape the lips this way to get to the vowel of what in some people call the long O, but we just call this the diphthong O. And of course in drama class and in English class we learn phonetics and the phonetic symbols so that when we learn how to pronounce a word, we can see it written out in phonetics. And if we learn phonetics in the context of the sound and shape of your lips, then we can learn to pronounce a word without having to listen to it. We don't, in English drama, and pronunciation, we don't use listening to learn to pronounce words, except in the very beginning. In other words, I've seen actors, and they have to say the word fiery, F-I-R-E-Y. Fiery, fiery. But some people don't know how to pronounce that, and they see it written, and they'll go fury, and then they'll realize, oh, that's supposed to be fiery. So unless it's that kind of a situation where I might say to an actor, it's not fury, it's fiery. Oh, yes, fiery. But in order to practice the sounds, we learn with first the lips. So o, so oo, o, aw, aw, aw. And then that's 3, then 4, aw, aw, and 5, ah, ah, and 6, ah. Ah, ah. Now, let me put those to words. Ooh, as in boot. O, as in boat. Aw, as in bought. Aw, as in body. ah, as in bother, ah, as in band. Now you should see my mouth moving in these different shapes. So for example, the number 6 is quite wide, oval. Ah. But number 5 that comes before it is much this way. Ah. Ah. And before that we have a slightly shorter one. Ah. Ah. Body, bother, and bather. So the number 4 position, body, we don't use so much anymore. We mostly say body and just go right to the number 5. This is because English in pronunciation has changed. But and then there are the other diphthongs that go from these vowels, such as before I do that, the other shape is called a Y buzz, and it's the way we make an E in English. E, as in beat. Now you notice the shape of my lips and the space between my teeth. E, E, E. So when we're practicing, we will go oo, E, ah, o, ah, ah, E. So we can really use our mouths to create the vowels very clearly. And actors will practice these things with exaggeration so that we get a full shaping of our mouths so that we speak more fully. I liken it to baseball players who are getting ready to go to bat. When they're on deck, they may hold 5 or 6 bats, swinging those bats. But when they come on to bat, they only have 1 bat, and that 1 bat feels very light because they were holding all 5 or 6 before. So when we work the lips big like this, oo, o, aw, ah, e. When we work our lips like this, it's like carrying those 5 bats, because then when we speak naturally, it's just like carrying 1 bat, very light. But actors on the stage have to use their lips more strongly than a normal person in common speech. However, if you teach pronunciation using these exercises, then the learner will more quickly grasp the shape of the different vowels rather than transferring them in a kind of a mental transfer from their native language to the English language, where they say to themselves, oh, that's O, it sounds the same as when I make a O sound in my native language. And we kind of don't want that. We want people to try and learn the shapes of English vowels as though they were learning them like a native speaker would learn them. Of course, the transfer from their native tongue to second language is always going to influence those shapes, but this will lessen the degree of foreign accent in the vowel sounds. Next, we have not only the one diphthong, O, but we have several others. For example, 5 to 1, ow, as in bout or about. We have 5 to E, I. Then we have a kind of a neutral, e, a. So the neutral sound is what we call the schwa, and that's right in the middle of your mouth, and neutral lips. But it does move forwards and back, so we get and and it. Now, I mention these because we go A, I, O, oi, and so we get these diphthongs. But the thing is that we can't find those diphthongs just with our lips alone, especially when you get to the neutral sound, o, I. These are the second part of the pronunciation problem, which is placement. Placement refers to where inside your mouth the sound is coming from. Now, this is very different than, for example, tones in Chinese. Tones in Chinese are referred to because we tend to think of these as sound shifts. But in English, we change the sounds not by shifting the tone, but by shifting the placement of the sound in our mouth. So if you were to imagine, you look at the side of my face and imagine this opening inside here, we have all those vowels taking place in different places. So when we go to the number 1 sound, ooh, ooh, that's actually very high and in the back. Ooh, ooh. And then we, slightly below that, in the neutral area, we have as in book. And many people from a foreign language learning English don't find that vowel very well, and so they pronounced book, book. They pronounced it more like they would say boot, book, or book instead of book. And then you move that sound slightly forward and you get as in bus. That's very common in English. And then you move it forward again and you get as in bet. And a little higher, as in bit. And then higher up you get e as in beat. And you see how my lips take over the Y buzz as soon as I get into that high E. So now when we do exercises as actors, we'll practice all the placement. So if we go from way down here, ooh. Then I move forward. Ooh, ee, ah. Now, is back here. Aw is back here. So this is 5. But 6 is here in the front. So when we're practicing, we want to shift all those things around. Now, I'll just try and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ooh, oh, aw, ah, e. I'm kind of concentrating as I haven't done it in a while, but actors will do it very fast. E, I, ah, aw, oh. So it goes quickly, and I'm looking at the camera, but I'm going to watch my mouth. Ooh, oh, aw, e, So I hear and can see my placement working, and I can watch my mouth at the same time. Placement is really important for those e. So e. Those are sounds that Americans, British, Australians, they sometimes even mix those sounds up. So the exercise is twofold. One, lips, ooh, oh, ow, things like that, and placement. I always liken the placement to imagining that the sound is a little actor and it's standing on your tongue, and your tongue is a moving stage floor. So you go e, aw, ah, and I imagine the sound coming from that place in my mouth. So those are the exercises we do for vowels. Now, as I said before, to break up the vowels, you have consonants as articulators, which give the shape to the various words. So now it's a very different thing. We have to work the tongue because that's the primary articulator, and we do it with voiced and unvoiced consonants. And we have exercises with those. For example, b, d, g, Budiga, 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 budiga. And then we use them without the voice. Same articulator, but it's... So we have b, d, g, b, d, g, and then we have p, t, k. Budiga, 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 budiga. Actors do this all the time, but learners of English should also learn how to do these exercises. And we do this with all the different vowels. For example, F and V. Biting your lower lip is hard for foreign speakers that don't do that normally, but it's with F and V. Another one we have to practice is s, sh, s, sh, s, sh, s, sh, and then with the voice z, j, z, j, z, j, z, j. And we do this over and over and over again for a long period until you get, like I am, a little bit dizzy. Another one is but we bite our tongue for that TH sound. Thus, this, their, things. So you hear the voiced and unvoiced. But we have to practice it by biting our tongue. And then we go from S, S, sh, sh, sh. Three other very important consonants that articulate sounds are the M, the N, and especially for Chinese learners, the L, O, O. The L at the end of a word, at the end of a sentence, at the end of a word, such as simple, is very important because in Chinese, many Chinese learners will say simple, simple, because they're not used to ending a word in L. So they have to be taught to touch the tip of their upper front teeth with the tip of their tongue. O, O, and make a nice dark L. Simple, building, not building, but building. The other two consonants there, and is because many Chinese are not used to ending words in M, and they're not used to making the tight lips for the M. So they often just go to a lazier kind of sound, such as sane, sane. And the confusion is between the word same and the word sane. So we have some exercises, just like the other consonants, just like the other consonants. O, o, o. When you make the N sound, the tip of your tongue touches about where it does when you make a D sound. D, 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 just at the ridge behind your upper front teeth. Whereas for the M, of course, your lips are tight together. And it's not a very resonant consonant, so you have to do it quickly. Same, as opposed to the more resonant N sound, sane, can be longer. So we just practice this. O, O. You see how my lips change for the N as well. And the other tricky one that many foreign speakers and learning American English have trouble with is finding an R sound after a vowel. That's called a post-vocalic or retroflex R, which is very different from what it sounds like in Chinese. Number one, we pull the tongue back. So it pulls right back like this in the back of our mouth. And we turn our lips out. So watch me. Or, or, boor, boor, So if I don't turn my lips out, it's harder. Or, or, or. It's a trick to turn your lips out. It's a trick to get your tongue to squish back. One exercise that we do is to kind of, with our fingers, preparing, pull your lip this way, pull your lip this way and stretch, pull your lips this way and stretch. We rarely make an E, a smiling E. We usually do an E because it's more resonant, but we do an exercise of going E, ooh, E, ooh. We don't really stress the vocalization there because it's the wrong E. E, U, E, U, E, U, E, U. But do, but do, but do, but do. So we try to develop combinations of consonants with the vowels, as in toot, 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 do, 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 boo, 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 but, bot, 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 book, 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 bit, bet, bit, bet, bit, bet. And those are your imagining the movement on the placement and connecting with the way your tongue articulates those vowels. Now, those are basically the exercises that actors do to produce vowels and articulation. I guess a musical part of the voice without the intonation. Intonation exercises are entirely different, and of course they will be different than anything you would do if you were learning Chinese tones or something like that, because individual words are not intonated in English unless it's an exclamation like, oh, something like that. But generally speaking, we have to use intonation to create meaning with whole sentences or combinations of words, not individual words. And we want to, most of the training in intonation is to avoid patterns of speech where every sentence sounds the same, which is what actors have a tendency to do, is particularly in long speeches, or they tend to pick up ways of speaking that are very common to their social milieu, like teen talk and the way kids talk, or picking up a rising intonation, which a lot of girls used to do, and now everybody is doing it, and now you hear it all the time, and now it doesn't mean anything, so we don't really do that anymore. We try to talk people out of doing it. It's the same kind of thing as where people start a sentence with so it's like, or like, or or like. Actors have to kind of stay away from that, particularly because in movies today, they don't actually speak the lines that they were given in the script. They will learn more or less what they're supposed to be talking about and then just improvise the way I'm talking to you now. But those exercises have little to do with articulation and vowel production and the things that concern how to pronounce and how to speak. The problem and the thing that these exercises can do for second language learners is they can teach them what those sounds are supposed to be like in their mouth, and then to practice English by practicing those sounds, and not by just transferring sounds from their native language that sound something like what the English language is supposed to be like, which creates a lot of problems, heavy accents. The reason we don't use listening as a means to get to this is because the students often filter. They have internal filters. They don't actually know what they're listening to. Even when I've had them tape record their sounds and listen back, they can't identify what they're listening to because they don't put it together with this placement, vowel shaping, and articulation shaping. It's a very different problem than, for example, learning tones. Many times we can't learn the tones except by hearing them. In Chinese, we have to kind of listen to what the tone is supposed to be like, and I've struggled with that a lot. But anyway, so it's a very different problem. I don't know what Chinese actors do to improve their articulation, but this is what we do in English to improve articulation. I will say that this style of teaching is rapidly disappearing because people are no longer learning to speak on stage. The 1930s and 1940s, we began to think of acting as a psychological experience, that we wanted to express some idea of a person, of a character. And this came because movies, like now, you're looking very closely at me, and if I were going to act something, I would struggle and it would show on my face. And the dialogue would turn into kind of a whispering. And I call this the whispering school of acting. I know because I worked on dozens of motion pictures when I worked as a motion picture dialogue coach in Australia. Really dozens of motion pictures with hundreds of actors who talk like this. They just do their dialogue, whispering. I don't even know if you can hear me, because their microphones are right here or tied into their neckties or something like that. And there's a sound guy there that's manipulating it so that they can get the sound. It's the whispering school of acting. So we don't really have these exercises so much anymore, unless it's actors that really want to work on the stage, and that's practically dead. There just isn't much. And this is one of the things that people don't realize when they use stage acting to teach English and have the actors, the students, do a play. This is just ridiculous because they have no experience with acting. So why should they get up and do a play? They have no experience training in speech and diction. They have no experience learning acting. Just because they learned English does not mean they can do a play.
I'll tell you what we'll do. You walk on all the ridges, and I'll practice my voice lessons.